Hello everyone, this is Whitney Weller from the Product Development and Management Association's International Headquarters in Chicago, Illinois. On behalf of the PDMA, I would like to welcome you to today's webcast, Bringing Agility to Business Development, sponsored by SmartOrg. These webcasts are hosted by the Product Development and Management Association with the support of SmartOrg for today's webcast. Today, PDMA is the largest professional organization of new product development professionals. You can find more information about PDMA at www.pdma.org. Today's presentation will be 90 minutes in length, including a 10-minute question and answer session at the end of the program. George Gibson, an active member of the PDMA webcast committee, will serve as today's webcast moderator. George is a new product and service development manager and scientist and has led research, development, and manufacturing organizations involved in bringing new products and services to market for more than 30 years. Currently, he is a program manager in the Xerox Innovation Group. George is inventor or co-inventor of 50 U.S. patents and has written more than 20 published papers in imaging, colloid science, and the management of research and development. Originally trained as a chemist, he did his undergraduate and graduate work at Binghamton University and holds MBA from the University of Rochester. George, at this time, I will turn the program over to you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm delighted to be a part of today's PDMA webcast and introduce our speaker, Somik Raha. Somik works at the intersection of strategy, technology innovation, and organizational transformation. Prior to SmartOrg, Somik worked as an Agile Software Development coach and founded the open-source HTML parser project. He received his PhD in decision analysis from Stanford University, conducting research on values-based decision-making, helping organizations align decisions with their core values. He is an active volunteer with ServiceSpace and blogs for the Huffington Post. Somik, I'm looking forward to hearing your insights on bringing agility to business development. Somik, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, George. Welcome, everyone, and I'm really excited to bring this webinar to you. This is really the coming together of a couple of streams that I'm extremely passionate about, and one of them is decision analysis, and the other is Agile Software Development, and there are some other ones which I will talk about as we go on. I spent a lot of time in the Agile Software Development world, and what I found was the Agile Software Development world had figured out how to produce very high quality software on time, on budget, and things were going well. And then one day, there was this client we were helping. I got called into the vice president's office, and the vice president said, Somik, this is great, your project's going well, but I have a different problem here. In this company, we have hundreds of engineers, and they come up with lots of great ideas. And I just can't figure out which ones to fund, and for how much, and how to do risk management on it. And that got me really interested. And so I started reading up on strategy, and that basically led me to Stanford's management science program to study strategy. And then I discovered that the only subject that actually took this problem head on was decision analysis, which helped me figure out what should I really be focusing on for my decision. I mean, it's one thing to study what Jack Welch would do with strategy case studies. It's quite another to figure out what I should do. And I found the field so deep that I decided to do a PhD in this. And my subject, as George mentioned, was values. And then when I got into the professional consulting world, what I discovered was there was this thread of unity between all these very different fields. And that thread of unity was we were doing this organizational practice that was supported by the field of decision analysis, but there was a lot of wisdom in this, and the wisdom was about being agile about business development. So we could take a lot of time doing a lot of research on which opportunities to fund, or we could have absolutely no process. And both are two extremes. So how could we really optimize our time, our resources, and make amazing decisions, carry out amazing strategies, and produce breakthrough innovation. That really was what I noticed, is the coming together of Agile values and the stuff that I've been seeing applied, decision analysis, in that community. And so this talk is really about bringing the two of them together. So I have a little metaphor for this. So if you think of strategy as the head and values as the heart component, then Agile Business Development is really the body. How do you have the stamina to deliver on a fantastic strategy that fulfills your values? And that's the hard question. We can read books and frameworks, but how do we bring it into our organizations? Let's see.
Somik, it seems like there's always a discussion between using your head to make decisions and using your gut. I think you're suggesting that there's a process that might allow you to choose the best of both of those.
Exactly. It's the idea is to take a holistic approach. And one interesting distinction that I discovered after my PhD was, when you do strategy calculations and you show a lot of numbers, it's good. People see, okay, this is the right path for me to take, but it doesn't inspire people very much. And it turns out that people are really motivated by things other than money. When it's a common misperception that money is the main motivator. And what I've discovered is, and this is supported by psychological research, that people need a deeper purpose. And so business is about finding a deeper purpose and then aligning resources to deliver on that purpose. So I'm going to define business development as the turning of an idea into a marketable business asset. With that definition, I'm going to jump into Agile Software Development, and this is a very big field. I could easily talk 2 hours on this topic, but I'm going to go to the essence. And the essence is captured by this little document called the Agile Manifesto, which I really like. And it says the following: we value collaborative development over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. And now I'm going to look at the current business development scenario, and I'm going to posit that if you look at all the literature, all the focus, all the frameworks that we have around, there's a lot of emphasis on processes and tools in the current business development world. And I'm seeing a parallel with the pre-Agile or the non-Agile software development world. And you have also comprehensive documentation in software development. The analog of that in business development is a lot of paperwork. We focus a lot on contract negotiation and following a plan. Someone else decides the strategy, and we have to deliver on it. I'd like this to move to a more agile form where we are doing collaborative development. That mindset is very, very important. We are producing, just like the software world produces working software at the end of the day. The documentation is not worth anything if the software doesn't work. The output of business development has to be working business models. And we also want to engage with the customer, collaborate with the customer to produce amazing stuff. And we also want to respond to change. So these ideas hold pretty well in the business development world as well. So I'm going to pause at this point and do a little poll. And the poll is about where you stand right now in business development in your organization. So here you'll see a couple of options. You could either choose, we don't have a formal business development process, or the term business development is often confused with sales, or you have a formal process but are not agile, or you have a formal process and are agile. So let's wait for people to answer that. And while you're answering this, I just want to make a little comment on the question. There's one option that we haven't put in there, which is we don't have a formal process but are agile. And I deliberately didn't put it in because if there are members of the audience who have been in the Agile software development world, you would testify to the fact that it requires an incredible amount of discipline to actually be agile. So I believe you do need something formal. Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds. Very good. This is a good cross section. Okay. Thank you. Can we close this poll? I also want to know what role you play in your organization. You'll see another poll come up now, and you can choose from one of 6 options. Are you in business development, marketing and sales, product management, product development, project management, or engineering? Very nice. We have a lot of product management folks here and product development. We'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll and show the results. We have mostly product management, product development folks, some project management folks, and some business development, marketing, sales folks. This will be great because this talk will help you understand how you could move into the business development role. Okay, so this is the map of business development. We are trying to reach the moon. Now, to reach the moon, we need to start with some very solid values. And so the values in the bottom that you see are the values of Agile Software Development. And I picked them up from a specific practice called extreme programming. And in that methodology, value communication, simplicity, feedback. And the 2 other values that are very interesting to me are courage and respect. Courage is about telling the truth. Courage is about standing up to the reality of the situation. So if you want to make a better world, first we have to fully accept the problems with the current world. Otherwise, we can't change it. And respect is about the respect for each other's needs to do high-quality work. We all want to create a workplace which is so awesome that we are ashamed to draw a paycheck. So how do we create a scenario where we can work in such an environment? And then we have practices, the Agile Software Development practices that are based on the values, and they pull us together to this goalpost. And the goalpost is what we saw in the manifesto, the 4 things in there. So that's the goalpost in the sense that if you reach there, that's not the moon, but that's necessary. That's the strong body and the stamina that you need to be able to go to the moon. So with that as a map, our question is, what are the practices? So there are lots of Agile Software Development practices. I'm not that interested in drawing on them. I'm more interested in the values that drive them, and I want to derive business development practices that take us to being agile. There are 3 basic parts in this. The first is assessing business development success, and that's about turning, we need to know how successful we will be in getting an idea into a marketable business asset. The second thing we need is if the business development has succeeded, how will this product fare in the market? And the third thing we need is what dollar amount represents the option value of developing our idea as a business, given where we are right now. And if we can answer these 3 questions, then we will be able to manage our business development opportunities with a cool head and a warm heart. So I'm going to go through each of these steps and build it up. So business development, the first part of it, the front end piece, is we have a cash flow, and that's going to drop because we're going to invest in development. Then at a certain point, we will hit the market by doubling down, and with that investment, either it takes off or it dies, the product dies. Now, of course, if you're betting a whole company on this, your company could take off or die. So that's the usual map of business development. And the front-end piece of it about business development success is we want to learn, instead of having one single investment, we want to break it up into phases where we learn something enough to decide that we can go to the next level and invest some more money. And if we don't get that evidence we need, we will stop. That's the basic idea behind Agile Business Development. We want to learn, fail, and succeed quickly. Now, I can show you a bunch of practices, but I'm not going to do that. And the reason is, we as consultants, it's a very big temptation for us to sell you on a methodology. What I really want to do instead is resist that temptation and share some deep wisdom with which you can design your own methodology. Now, I'll also share some practices at the end, but I want to leave you with some ideas that are more or less timeless in our current context. And I want to draw on the third thing that I'm really passionate about. It's the patterns movement. And the software world took this up to communicate wisdom in their field. And here's a very nice definition of it. Each pattern describes a problem which occurs over and over again in our environment, and then describes the core of the solution to that problem in such a way that you can use the solution 1,000,000 times over without ever doing it the same way twice. So I'm going to capture some of the wisdom in business development with patterns. And patterns are communicated. It's a literary form. It's communicated with a name, a problem, a solution. There may be an image that captures the emotion of the pattern or the structure, and some consequences. The first one is evidential work. We're sometimes so focused on our work that we lose sight of the big picture. So the problem here is when we're investing serious money behind an idea, it's very easy for us to be distracted away from the evidence we need to justify the investment by the work that needs to be done. The work is causing us to get distracted. And the solution to this is design work to deliver evidence as quickly as possible. And the consequences, if we can do this, is we get a clear idea of the proof needed to justify investment, the work that derives from that, so we can deliver that proof, and then we can work out the cost and the schedule of that work. But the order is always, what do we need to see to justify this investment? And I'm going to keep talking about related patterns, and this will allow you, when you get the deck, it'll allow you to interconnect things, but we'll get to learning plans later. But one real easy way of thinking about this question is the mortgage question. What do you need to see before mortgaging your house to fund the project that has come up before you? And this question immediately gets you to treat the resources of the company as your resources, and you become far more sensitive about important information that's needed. So we're going to do a little simulation. I don't know how well this will work, but we're going to try. So there's this company called Corp, which makes statistical data analysis products. And you have a bunch of them: Beta Life, Beta AB, Fly, Beta Flow, Beta Zoom. And now they've come up with a new product called Beta Mark. And this has been just proposed. And this new product, Beta Mark, allows analysis of the effectiveness of marketing campaigns by examining social media chatter for emotional content. So imagine you've done a marketing campaign, and people are talking about it on Twitter. So, for instance, Apple just did their show yesterday, and Twitter was ablaze with the new Mac, the MacBook Pro, and so on. So can we analyze the Twitter feeds, which are public, and understand the emotion behind it to understand how people are responding to this? So that's the product proposal. We're going to do this. And with this product, Beta Corp will enter the social media space. And so our question here is, what evidence do you need to see before mortgaging your house on this product? Now, I'm going to enlist you, the audience, as my team members now. This product proposal has come up in front of us, and I'm going to ask you to think about this question. You're in the statistical data analysis company, and Betamark has come up in front of you. What evidence do you need to see before mortgaging your house to fund Betamark? So go ahead and please type in the chat whatever comes to your mind. Okay, I see some business plan, benefits versus cost, value proposition. Here's an interesting one. How many companies would be interested in buying the product? Yes, that's a very important question. Competitive analysis. Are there other people who are already doing it? How successful are they? ROI, which is basically having a good business plan. Appropriate team skills. Proof of principle demonstrated. Lynn has a very good one. Lead customers identified. Very nice. Some evidence the core platform will be robust enough to be around to support the idea. Haley says this. Very nice. This is the right kind of conversation we want to have. Excellent. Okay, so this is great. I think the creative juices are flowing. We're going to move the chat to the side. This is a very good list. I did this with another team, and I broke it up into 3 phases. And the 3 phases had to do with the 3 proof points. And so it basically touches on a lot of the things you've come up with. And so the first one was around, can we actually show that there is some value in this? Can we get our own company excited about this? Can we develop, can we get people to rally around it? The second one was around proving the value proposition with customers, which a lot of you talked about. Is there a lead customer? Is there someone we can take into this? And the third one was about scaling. Can we, before we hit the market, can we get a robust pipeline? How big is this? And can we actually have a strong go-to-market strategy? So now the interesting thing here is the work phases, phase 1, 2, and 3, are in service of the proof point. And the first one was customer enthusiasm and sponsorship of the company. The second one was around technical performance and customer commitment. And the third was around scaling, robust pipeline, and scalable business case. And most of you had some component of each of these. And here's an interesting one I just want to call out. Somebody said, is there a Brian Lane said, is there a champion already present? And that's what you need for the first phase. You need a champion who will take this through. And what you're also seeing on this slide is that the work then follows the evidence that you need to deliver, and then you can get very concrete. Well, if that's what you need to show, that there is customer enthusiasm in the first phase, we need to get pilot customers and do all of these things. And the investment for that is about $500,000 and won't take more than 6 months. Great. Second phase is a lot more involved. You've got to prove it with customers, and that's about $1 million, takes a year. Third phase is really serious money. You're getting $6 million, and we're now going all out to get ready to hit the market very hard. So each phase, if you don't get the evidence, you stop, or you rethink where you are. But this kind of shows how this works. Learning plans. So when communicating our development plans, it's pretty easy to lose sight of the learning that's needed to justify further investment. Therefore, we will depict key stages of evidence needed and the work needed to deliver that evidence on a time scale. And the consequences of this is you show the entire development plan on a simple timeline that communicates the key evidential stages, the work involved, and the sequence. And here's a graphic that shows this. So here you can see that the proof points are in red on top, and the first phase, to develop the value proposition, get the approval, it's in service of the proof point of demonstrating customer enthusiasm and Beta Corp sponsorship. Once you have that, the second phase must deliver the evidence around technical performance, can this actually work, and getting customer commitment. And the third one is on the robust pipeline and scalable business case, and tells you the overall funding that's needed by this and the time it takes to do it. So you get a spatial sense as well. So single slide, single piece of paper, a chart that communicates what is the development plan, what is the money we're asking for, and why. Once we have the plan down, the question is, well, how likely are we to deliver the evidence? And this graphic is a painting, very famous painting actually from Japan, which is about the blind man and the elephant. And I'm sure many of you have heard of that story, where each blind person feels a different part of the elephant and has a different perception. And so the problem with evidence assessment is different people understand different things when talking about uncertainty in a qualitative fashion, which makes communication very difficult. And so the solution is assess calibrated probabilities for each point of evidence, multiplying to get overall probability of success. And the consequences, we get a simple quantitative understanding of uncertainty that is comparable across projects. So I have a little graphic here to demonstrate this. So here we're showing all the projects, and we're showing the overall probability of success, multiplying the probabilities in each phase. And here, if you see beta fly, it's color-coded with red, and red is all the projects in the idea phase. Blue is the next phase, which is you're proving the value proposition with a real customer in a pilot. So the question I would see as a business development manager is, why is something in the idea phase having such a high probability of success, close to 70%? And what that immediately alerts me is that there's a calibration problem going on, that someone is being over-optimistic. So what I would do is to say, well, things that are in the idea phase should never have a chance of success above 25% in this company. And you can pick your level. And if you do that, we'd say, okay, well, that's more like it. We've cut fly down to size. Beta fly should be more in the, the lower numbers down there. That's an invitation for calibration whenever you see graphics like this. Another one interesting exercise that you can try in your company is get your team into a room and tell them, well, assume that this project has a high chance of success. Now write down a number that means a high chance of success for you. And I'm willing to bet that you'll be surprised by the different numbers that come up from this exercise. I had a quick Q&A question here from David. He says the first phase is far too expensive. Prove the minimum viable product first. I think that's a valid point. So if for some companies, $500,000 is nothing, it's peanuts. For other companies, it's a lot of money. So it's a relative comment there, really. And so for companies where that's a lot of change, then you would need to have some evidence in there before you decide to even invest that much. So David's point is very well taken. And in fact, you would want to customize and make your own work, your own learning plans with the proof points that you need to see because it's your money on the line. So yes, David, you're thinking on the right track. Next pattern, reasons behind numbers. So people can get into a very mindless number game and lose sight of the real purpose of uncertainty assessments to discover learning gaps. Therefore, before you accept numbers from people, obtain reasons for them. And the consequence is the logic behind the numbers becomes very transparent and you facilitate team learning. This is particularly important because before you know it, any interesting analytic process will get hijacked and it'll become an analyst project and the insight is completely buried and you can't just get to it easily. Here's another pattern. People can follow power and feel shy to share what they truly know. So when you are doing assessments on development success, disallow calling out numbers in a group and force each member to write down their number and then collect it when all are done. I can't tell you how important this simple idea is. Is that in a group, when you have different power structures, when you do this, you actually start to discover big gaps in information and they become transparent and you can then drive the discussion towards the learning gaps. What is it that one person knows that the other one doesn't, and how should we adjust our assessment? So moving on, let's continue with our simulation. So I'm focusing on the second phase. The second phase was proving value proposition with customers. And when we take that particular proof point, there are two components of the proof points. One is technical performance, the other is customer commitment. And so technical performance is about running a human control group and checking that Betamark picks up 90% of all actual chatter, let's say on Twitter, as the human control group. And the second is Betamark distinguishes correctly between positive and negative feelings at least 90% of the time. So these are two very concrete evidence points that when you start to work on them, this is what we need to demonstrate. And then the customer commitment runs at least one customer signs up for company-wide adoption. Then we'll know that our phase 2 is successful, which is about proving the value proposition with customers. Now I'm going to focus on the first one. Betamark picks 90% of all chatter, and I'm just going to run a little simulation with all of you. And in the simulation, what I'm going to ask you to do is, now imagine you're in the room with the entire development team, and we're all discussing this together. I'm going to ask you to think that you're actually working with developers and you're having a discussion. Given what you know about this product, list reasons for success and list reasons for failure. We're going to do success first. So list reasons why you think this company, now you belong to Beta Corp, okay? List reasons for why you will be able to pick up 90% of all actual chatter. Here he says, well-established paradigm, easy to adopt. That's a good reason. Let's get some more in there. Make process more efficient than human interpretation. Well-known technology available. Sven's reason is a pretty good one. Known sources, places to look for chatter. Evidence backs up data through stochastics. All good reasons. Okay, now let's bring up the other chat box, listing reasons for failure. David's point, need the freedom to direct at relevant chatter. Reasons for failure. Well, bots can game the system. That's a very good reason. Really great job. Yes. Lack of competency in-house. Very good. Evidence for similar cases. Industries are not there. People haven't succeeded at this. Products aren't valued as we expected. All sorts of chatter you can't find. Untested technology. Privacy issues. May reduce decision-making to an algorithm. Interesting. Very good. So this is the kind of process you would run. You'd say, well, take each evidence point, list the reasons for success, list the reasons for failure. Now let's have these chat boxes move to the side, move out of the screen, and I'm going to advance this. So here's a little structure there for that proof point. I'm going to list the reasons for success, and we said lab results are promising. Can we get the reasons for success, the chat box over here? Just overlaying the success, and similarly the chat box for failure overlaying the red part. So these are reasons I put in lab results promising, and you guys came up with your own reasons, and we're going to see them momentarily on the screen. Let me just bring them here. Okay, so reasons for success and reasons for failure. Now, I want you to see these, and so given that this is what your team has come up with, okay, you're going to see a poll very shortly, and the poll is, what probability would you put for success, given these success and failure reasons? So the poll will come up momentarily. Okay, so given these reasons for success and failure, where do you place the probability of success for this proof point? Very good. Let's show the results to the audience. Okay, so we can see that most of us are coming in at 20 to 40%. Now the interesting thing is, somebody came in at 60 to 80%, and somebody came in between 0 to 20%. So I want somebody. So I want the 0 to 20% people. The chat box will open up for you. 0 to 20%. I want the guys who came up with this to explain why you put 0 to 20%. Put in what you were thinking if you're around. And another chat box will also come up. It says 80 to 100%, but this is for the 60 to 80% folks, the 3 folks who gave 60 to 80%. Can you write in that box what you were thinking? So I want the high end and the low end to tell us, to share their thoughts on why they came high and low. Low criteria for success. And the 60 to 80%, there are 3 of them. Can we get them to share a few reasons? Okay, so here he says, too many variables to convince key stakeholders that data is valid. Too many unknowns, Glenda says. These are all excellent reasons. What about the 3 folks who came up with 60 to 80%? Can we get anyone to say anything? Well, maybe the 60 to 80%, if I was on that side, I might say something like, well, you know, this is something we have had a lab demo on, we've showed good results, and we've had good reviews in trade magazines where they say this is pretty insightful. So stuff like that on the other end. And the idea behind this is you're not trying to get a single number just for the heck of it. You're actually trying to find knowledge gaps. And so we have Denise, Glenda, Haley, and Bob. They're giving their reasons, and we have, I think I saw Catherine on 60 to 80. So we would have them talk to each other and say, well, why are you so optimistic, Catherine, or someone else? And they will definitely learn something from this conversation. That's the whole point of this exercise with the numbers. So that is the intent behind this. That's how you would facilitate an assessment discussion and learn what the knowledge gaps are. So thank you for participating in that. Moving on, so I would take your assessments, and this is a sample assessment we've done with other teams. So we said, okay, let's put down the probabilities in there. And each phase, you can see how we have 50%, 75%, and so on. And the one we were looking at, the second phase, we were looking at coverage accuracy. So let's say some team came up with 90%, emotional accuracy 80%, customer coverage 60%. You multiply these and you get numbers for each of the phases. And the overall probability is 3.88%. Now, suppose you managed to deliver on the first phase. You've been successful, you've shown customer enthusiasm, you've got Beta Corp sponsorship, then your overall probability of success here goes up to 10%. Now, I must tell you that you might think the 4% and the 10% numbers are too small. This is fairly typical of new ideas. Don't be afraid about that. This is pretty typical. In fact, if it is not so small, you should be worried that someone's fudging and someone's not thinking clearly. So let me pause very briefly. Any reflections, any questions from this? We have a question here. David says, why not devise a metric for uncertainty? David, we have a metric, and that metric is called probability. And that probability, when we did the assessment, that's how you do the assessment. So once we have that conversation, the team will then come collectively, pick a number that represents how uncertain they feel about the chance of success of that particular idea. So you meant calibrate. So when you say, so David says, why not calibrate? I completely agree. That was the point of the pattern, which was about comparing across projects and devising a standard for the company. In fact, some companies will give guidelines saying, if you've not demonstrated the value proposition yet, you cannot give more than this percentage chance of success. If you've already demonstrated it in the lab and you're on a pilot, then you can go up to this level. And if the pilot succeeds, that's how much you can go. So you can think of chief probability officers that can, manage this. Brent's question, I'm going to punt on for the moment. You can make it evidence-based. Yes, David, that's the entire intent. We want to make this evidence-based, based on what we know internally about our company, about what we need to deliver, and about our relationships with our customers. So it takes all of that into account. When you come up with the probability, that's what you're really doing. The question is right on. That's exactly what you should be thinking about. And here's another one. Jan says, should different members of the teams vote be given different weights? Jan, no. We could easily devolve this whole process into a weight and rate. That's not the intent. In fact, when you do that, it completely defeats the purpose of the assessment. The assessment idea is really to discover what some people know and what others don't, and to learn from each other. And once you do, we have found in our experience that teams are able to come up with a probability that represents how uncertain they really are. And the point is, the numbers are here to facilitate the discussion and are not the other way around. And what methods, concepts are you pulling from Six Sigma methodology? I will just touch on that very, very briefly. The idea is, I'm really drawing on Agile Software Development, and Agile Software Development has been influenced by Six Sigma. So let me put it this way, that having a cross-functional team together is absolutely essential to be able to pull off this kind of a discussion. So you can't just do this with developers in the room or business guys in the room. You need both. You need all the people who are knowledgeable about the system and need to make decisions about it, getting together to do this kind of an assessment. And what if it is a disruptive domain, unknown to most inside the company? Well, those are the interesting ones. In fact, Francois, that's what we're getting into in the next phase, where we're talking about the market. If it's a disruptive domain, and it's unknown to most people inside the company, I would think that people should give very low probabilities of success, because this is really about how much they know. So your probability is really an indication. It's the whole truth about what you currently know about the situation. That's what you're really doing. So this would fit right in. Your numbers would be lower. How do we overcome the challenges of a geographically scattered team? Well, believe it or not, we're just doing it. With this webinar, I just had you guys enter into chat windows and do this. There are lots of collaboration tools out there. I mean, it's much more challenging to do this distributed. There's no question about that. But if the value is seen in the process, then I think the tools will follow. We can make tools work to do something like this. Fantastic question. Thank you so much. Please keep them coming, and I'll try to answer them as we keep going forward. I'm going to move to the next item of my invisible slide, which basically says this is the market success. Market success, given you've succeeded in development, how big is the pie? So what's the market performance of your business idea? That's what we're looking at here. And let me start with the patterns. So this is the second part of that graph, where you're doubling down and you can take off or die. And when you're planning this, remember, we are at the stage before we even invested in development. So we're looking at the market where we stand right now. We want to plan not just one scenario. We want to have multiple scenario thinking with different paths of takeoff. One would be fantastic, other would be not so fantastic but pretty great, and third is, okay, and of course then you could still die. So we want to get out of single scenario thinking. The first pattern I want to share here is evidentially assessable factors. It is so easy for us to get into a game of pulling numbers out of a hat that we can't justify, that we really want to tie the market performance metrics to evidence. And so the problem here is economic factors are hard to support with evidence. They can be easily, if you have such factors, they can be easily manipulated to distort our understanding about opportunity size. Therefore, decompose economic models such that factors that are hard to support with evidence are derived from other factors that are easy to assess on the basis of evidence. It's a very simple idea. And so what happens is your assessment conversations become rooted in real-world knowledge instead of devolving into the abstract. And the numbers that you produce are of much higher quality. So in our simulation, so let's say we're talking about beta mark again. So we start with the question, well, so I could start by asking, well, what's the revenue forecast? And you can come up with fantastic revenue forecast. But that would be violating this pattern. We'd say, well, wait a second, what do we really know? Well, let's look at the total addressable market. And we have similar kinds of products. And so the market really here is about marketing, the number of marketing campaigns that people take help for, and use statistical products. And let's say there are 10,000 such units every year that we can tap into. Then the next question we want to ask is, well, of those 10,000 units that people would end up using these, some kind of help with market analysis, how many of them will take the help of statistical products like ours? And so let's say 20% of them. Okay, that's the penetration. Well, of that 20% penetrated market, how much are we going to get? And so market share is about competitive structure. How many other people are in there? And given the state of competition, what will be our take of the market? When we combine these three together, we multiply them, we get, okay, the units we can sell per year is 500 based on this logic. Okay. Then we have the unit price of what we can sell for. And this, again, comes from our real-world knowledge of how much the market will bear. And so there's some evidence associated with other products we've managed to sell and what other people have been able to sell. And multiplying that with the units sold, we get the revenue. Then there's the unit cost. What does it currently cost for our existing products, and what will it cost if we go in this direction? So let's say $2,000 per unit. So we get a variable cost in there, and we combine the two along with the fixed cost, and we get an annual profit figure. And the fixed cost is, again, an assessment. So the color coding is also very interesting here. All the single-walled, well, these should have been single and double. Well, all the yellow ones are things you can assess, and all the red ones, or the brownish red ones, are derived factors. And so you can now separate the conversation into assessments and calculations. Next pattern is groups have a tendency towards groupthink and compromise, which prevents discovery of important information gaps on factors that drive economics. So you don't want people to come up with numbers, just as a most likely case. What you want to do is to force people to think on the extreme ends of each factor and capture both ends of the assessment as a range, along with something in the middle as well. And so the consequence of this pattern is people who have a strong difference of opinion are no longer ignored or steamrolled, but they're factored into the decision-making process. So we're no longer anchored to either the optimistic or the pessimistic, but we're using both along with a realistic scenario. And I'm going to try a little simulation where I'm going to force you to think on extreme ends now. So to set up the context, we've already finished assessing the total addressable market as ranging from 5 to 20,000 units, and the penetration is ranging from 10 to 30%. Okay? Now we are talking about the market share for Betamark. You're on my team, and you are assessing what the market share will be, and this is based on competitive structure. So I'm going to start by asking you, well, please enter reasons for the market share being really high. So go ahead and give me reasons for why the market share for this product, given the competition out there, can be extremely high. Reputation, low competition, my product is better. Excellent. These are great reasons. High demand, differentiating technology. Fantastic. Now, this chat is going to remain here, and we'll see another chat box which says, how high is high? So now come up with numbers, and I want to see what your range is. How many, what percentage? This is a number between 0 and 100%. What percentage market share can we get when we say high? Look at that range. Isn't that interesting? So 20% to all the way to 80%, which kind of demonstrates my earlier point. How high is high? Now, the interesting thing that we're going to do here is the way you resolve this. Unlike the other one where I have people talking, I say, okay, I'm going to take the highest number in this, and which I think was 80%. Okay, I'll take that and I'll put it in my high, and I'll use that. And that's, somebody said 100%. So I'll just make a quick comment about 100%. You should generally never put 100% probability about anything. In the world I come from, 100% is, when you say you're 100% certain about something, what you're really saying is you're willing to be shot if you are proven wrong. That's how sure you need to be before you put 100 on anything. But be that as it may, so this is the process. I would take the most extreme credible range, and another quick way of thinking about this is this number is so extreme that if it were to be any higher, you would fall off your chair. It's like the butt cheek test. One butt is off the chair, the other butt is still on the chair. You're just wobbling. Any higher, you'll fall off. So that's the number I want. Moving on to let's get these two chats out of the way. Let's do the same thing for the market share being low. So let's get some reasons for the market share being really low. Saturated marketplace, great. Late entry, too high price, competition is already too many competitors. Very good. Poor product quality, broad market research, young market, excellent. Benefits not understood. Bad ads, yes. That would be an irony for a marketing product. Very good. Let's get the other box in there, which now says, well, how low is low? 10%, 5%, 2, 10, 15, 2, 5, 10, 20, 1%, 2%, 5%. Excellent. Okay, so again here the same logic applies. You should never put a 0 on anything. 1 is pretty low. So what I would do then is I would take the lowest number, the lowest credible range here, and use that as my other extreme. Let's get these two chats out of the way, and let's get the next chat box in, which says, what is your base number? Let's get these two chats out. Okay. So you see now what is your base number, and this is what we call the over-under number. So there's a 50% chance that you will be above this, and 50% chance you'll be below this. That's the technical way of putting it. But another way of thinking about it intuitively is, if you bet on this number, and you left for a vacation and you came back, where do you think you would be? What would actually happen? And if you find you can answer that question easily, then you haven't found it. But if you're very uncomfortable, you're not really sure, then you're at the right position. You're really squirming, the maximum squirm. So we're seeing it between 20 and 30%. Excellent. Okay, let's close this. So I'm going to summarize the base numbers, say maybe 25%. This one, I'll usually take the middle one. So let's keep going. So you would list on a chart like this reasons for high, and I would list all the numbers people come up with. And so in this example, in this slide, I've taken the most extreme one, 40%. But in our group, we had 80%. So I would actually put 80% here. And similarly, I take the lowest one, say 5%, and here I got 25%. Ironically, we actually came up with 25% in this simulation. So that's how I get the range. Now, what do I do with these ranges? The thing is, we do these assessments, and it's pretty typical for companies to get stuck with what they really understand well and miss completely the big ones that they ought to be focusing on. So you don't want to focus too much on the feather and lose sight of the stone that can completely upset the cart. So the first one pattern here is most leveraged uncertainties. It is easy for us to fixate on uncertainty in economic factors that are in front of us or the factors with the highest leverage, as opposed to looking at both and finding the ones that really matter. Therefore, we want to identify the most leveraged uncertainties. So in plain speak, it's not enough to say, hey, this factor is the most uncertain, let's focus on it. And it's not enough to say that this factor has the most leverage. That's good as far as it goes. We want to look at both. And the consequence of doing that is conversations can now focus on uncertainties that have the most leverage instead of just focusing on swing or leverage by themselves. And our discussion can now get into what are the most important ones and how do we get the upside and contain the downside. And here is a simple example of doing that. So this is what we call a tornado chart. So continuing with our simulation of beta mark, here we have the assessments, total available market, product peak share, market penetration, everything. And what you're seeing here is each of the factors is varied from its low, base, and high numbers, the three numbers that you assessed, while all the other factors are kept at the base. So when you vary total available market, we keep it at 5 and keep all the others at base, you get a number. That's the left end of the TAM. And 20 is at the other end, everything else at base, and then, of course, the base value is in the middle. And when you draw this for everything, you sort it based on highest swing, you get a tornado-like shape. And what this tells you is that the ones at the top have the highest swing. And what we often find is that people are obsessing about costs, the variance in the cost. And most of the time, the tornado shows that the cost is a tiny blip at the bottom. And generally, you can institute good processes to keep the cost down. That's not a hairy one that will kill the business. It's usually the ones around the value and the market ones that really make or break it. So that's what this chart really helps us to find. And what I'm also going to draw your attention to is the bar at the bottom. That's the combined uncertainty bar. And what that really shows is it's a combination of the top 4 uncertainties. Why top 4? You can take more if you want. The top 4 account for mostly 90% of the variance in this situation. And there are 3 points on that. So the left end of that cyan bar is the low, the high end is the high, and the base one is the 50-50 point. So it's like, we call these bars 10, 50, 90 bars. There's a 10% chance you'll be below the left end, 10% chance you'll be above the high end, and a 50-50 chance that you'll be above or below the tick in the middle. So the top 4 factors here capture most of the variance in the NPV, and the 10, 50, 90 bar basically summarizes the complete uncertainty into a single range. And so here it ranges between negative 18 million, so you could lose money, to all the way to 197 million. And the base is more around 44 million. So this is a good point. So let me open up the forum very briefly for any questions on what you've seen so far, if anything is unclear on this aspect on how to assess market performance of your products. So Sven has a quick question here, which is too much focus on core business a risk? I think, well, it depends. If you are developing, if you're in business development, then that's your job. You've got to develop the asset as a marketable asset. And if you can't, then all the effort the engineers are putting in, or your technical folks are putting in, will be for nothing. On the other hand, if you spend all your time doing these analyses and then engineering doesn't deliver, then that's not going to work either. So we need a balance. I don't think one is more important than the other. I'm emphasizing this because this is for the business development community. So that's why these have more of a focus. But there are operational practices like Lean and Agile Software Development. If you're into software, you would still be doing these to deliver high-quality products. Yeah. So where do you evaluate fit with business strategy? That's an excellent question, Dorian. I am going to touch on, since you brought it up, I will actually touch on this at the very end. So please remind me if I don't. It's a beautiful question. In fact, we are sort of going in that direction in the next section, the last section of the talk. Okay, let's give another minute for any other questions to come up. It's pretty important that everything in this section is really clear because we'll be combining both of these very soon. How do you rate so Francois has a question. How do you rate a fresh, new, unknown market with high swings in tornado chart? Well, it's an excellent question. I'm going to show you in the next section. So thank you. This is perfect. Given the advent of the semantic web, the highest uncertainty for this product seems to be technical. Yeah, David, so that's a good question again. It depends. So some products you will find have more of a technical challenge but a well-established market. Other products have a pretty well-understood technology but a nascent market. So you could have both. And I will be showing tools on how to combine them in the next section. These are all the right questions. Maybe I guess I should just move on then, because these are exactly the kind of questions I want you to be thinking about. So again, my invisible agenda slide, which says supposed to say evaluate option value. So we finished assessing business development success. We finished assessing market performance. Now we want to combine the two and produce an option value. Why option value? Because what you really have with an idea is not an actual business, but an option. If you fund in it, you can get a good business opportunity in the future. So its value has to be tempered by the uncertainty. Now, the problem with facing us in general option valuation is that people try to make very complex financial models to do this. And some of you may have heard of real options theory. Once you go down that path, it's all over. As in, there's no way you can have a sensible conversation with anyone about it. So the problem is placing dollar values on development opportunities as a task that can be obfuscated by complex financial models, which shift the focus away from collaborative learning discussions and more toward magic numbers. Therefore, use simple options valuation to make clear the logic behind development opportunity valuation. I'm going to show you a little graphic on how this happens. So here's a little decision tree, and you see invest and don't invest. These are your decision points. The rectangle represents a decision, and the circles represent uncertainties. Now, of course, this is a simplified picture, so you have the three phases of uncertainty, and I've rolled it into one. That's the development uncertainty, your learning plan. And you're going to deliver, at the end of it, you're going to have a marketable business asset, which you can take to the market. And that's what success means. And we have assessed the probability. And if you remember, it was 4% for beta mark. And if you can't, then you stop. You don't double down and take it to the next level. Once you've reached the market, then you start making it a business. An engine has finally come to life. And then you're at the mercy of the market, and you will either have fantastic results, good results, or maybe mediocre or downright bad results. That's the simple model that you would use to characterize this option. And what you're going to do is you're going to roll back the tree and calculate equivalent dollar amounts in a very simple valuation procedure that incorporates uncertainty and the value, and you can directly trace. So when you come up with numbers, if you ask, well, how did this come about? Well, it's because the uncertainty here was very low, or the dollar amount here was very high. And you can clearly break it down to its constituents and challenge different things. That's very important for collaborative discussions. So here's an example on our simulation. Here you can see that we've put an option valuation of $750,000 for beta mark, where it stands right now. And this is the equivalent value. So this means if you had $750,000 in front of you and this opportunity, you would be just indifferent between the two. The equivalent value would go up once you finish the development phase, because now you have removed the uncertainty of development from it. So you can see that from 82 million, it dropped to 0.75 million because of all the inherent uncertainty in development success. And then, where is that coming from? That's actually coming from, remember the tornado diagram? The combined uncertainty, the 10, 50, 90 bar which summarized it? Those three numbers, that's what you see here. We've just basically planted them here. And when you roll this back, you're basically multiplying them with the probabilities we put on these branches and go all the way back. That's how we get the numbers. It's very straightforward calculation. You could do it on a whiteboard with a simple calculator, and people can understand it. And you get a single number, and that single number, the 0.75 million, it includes all of our thoughts on uncertainty and value taken together. Now we're going to use this to develop it further. We say, well, focusing on single number valuations of projects hides the underlying uncertainty in the upside and downside of that project. So yeah, we want to calculate a single number, but using it by itself is very dangerous. So we want to use 10, 50, 90 bars and compare the projects to figure out which project is most uncertain and which has the highest upside and downside. So for instance, a picture like this, I can show the 10, 50, 90 bars, and each of them is a separate project. And this helps me see the biggest upsides and downsides that need to be managed. So going to our simulation, we have put beta mark in the middle there, and we have this other product called beta zoom, and this has a huge bar. And what this bar is saying is you could lose the most amount of money on beta zoom. You could also make the most amount of money on beta zoom, which is very interesting. And in real life, you'll often have this situation. I've noticed this come up again and again. Opportunities that make you the most money also stand to make you lose the most money. So now, suppose I double-click on that bar and I show the tornado that this bar is actually summarizing. That's what you'd see and say, oh my goodness, look at that. The top 4 uncertainties have all to do with market understanding, and there are big swings. Just look at that. Total available market ranges from 1,000 units to 100,000 units. What that's telling me is we really don't understand this market. It's a new market. It's a nascent market. A lot of work has to be done to develop this market understanding, maybe hire more people who have understood the space or developing the space. And this is a project we want to watch very cautiously. So that's what this graphic is really telling us by looking at the comparative uncertainty. So that's the kind of conversations you want to promote. Next, people can get emotionally attached to pet projects and lose sight of the big picture. This happens all the time because people are advocating for their pet ideas. Well, what you can do to move people out of that situation is use uncertainty value screens to understand where development projects fall and how they need to be managed. So here in this graphic, you can see I've broken it up into 2 axes. So you have got low and high on the X and low and high on the Y. And the X-axis is about commercial value given development success, and the Y-axis is the chance of development success. And depending on where they fall, things that have a very low chance of success and very low value are what we call white elephants. And these are projects that you should really move out of that grid. You should not, they suck all your time and attention, and they prevent you from being amazingly successful. The ones that you want are the pearls, high chance of success and high value if successful. But to get to the pearls, you really need to invest in oysters, where there's a low chance of success, but very high value if you're successful. So you need to move up from oysters to pearls. Then, of course, you have the bread and butter projects, high chance of success, but not that much value. You got to keep some of them running, I guess, to run the economic engine. So this basically facilitates a very rich conversation on how to feasibly move your projects to a better place. And the idea here is you want to allow people to kill good projects so that they can work on great projects. And when you put it that way, it's much easier for people to accept their pet projects being killed because they can see that it isn't providing that much value. It becomes emotionally much more acceptable. So this is a conversation that allows us to face the truth and enlist the support of people to the projects that really, really make the most sense. Yes, this is a 90-minute webcast mark, and I have some more questions here. Peter says, can you use the tornado to prioritize learning plans? We are actually using that. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing. Peter, you're right on. The uncertainty value screen is one way of prioritizing, and in our simulation, you can see that here are the projects where they fall, and you can see beta mark, beta fly, and beta AB are all white elephants, and that's very scary for us, and we should have the conversation, how do you move these out of this quadrant, and maybe bread and butter, maybe pearls, maybe oysters, but we can't sustainably support investing in this if it continues to remain as white elephants. Now, beta flow is an oyster, beta life is a pearl, great. Beta zoom, as you can see, because of the tornado, it's way out there in market value, which is fantastic, but it also makes you wonder, well, it seems fairly speculative. I'm not sure I trust this. I need to go find, because of the comparative uncertainty, the market uncertainty from the tornado, I need to go refine this. And maybe move this more to the left so we can actually start to believe this. And the probability is so low that it's all the way down. So it gives you a very good sense of where things fall. Next, evidence-driven funding. Investments in large opportunities with low chance of success, like beta zoom, are necessary and yet perilous. Therefore, invest by evidence delivered in preceding phase. And so the idea here is you're making use of the learning plan now. And the intention is your investments are not arbitrary, but they're very thoughtful and they're connected to delivery of evidence. One of the easiest ways to kill innovative projects is to use P&L thinking on them. Instead, when you're still in the process of business development, you want to tie their outcomes to the learning plan so that they have to deliver. Success is basically delivery of the proof points, not P&L accountability. And that's what this is connected to. As in, you have oysters, you want to have learning plan accountability, not P&L. So continuing on, Next thing we can do is, one of the biggest problems is organizations often use budgets as a constraint when making their funding decisions without clearly communicating the value of securing more resources to fund development. And so you solve this problem by ordering development projects by their productivity on a plot of cumulative value versus cumulative investment. So here I put cumulative value versus cumulative cost or investment, and here I put all the projects and I've ordered them by the ratio of value by cost. And so the first dot that you would see has the highest bang for the buck. But if you invest a little more, you'll get more value. And so let's say your budget line falls here, so everything to the left of the budget line is in. Now, the case you want to make to upper management is, if you put in this extra money, you get this extra value. And this is a very, very powerful communication tool. We often call it the CFO chart. What it does is it provides feedback on the value that needs to be cut that goes together with a cost cut. So oftentimes you'll be told, we don't have the budget for this. Well, okay, if you're going to cut my cost, this is what you're cutting in terms of value, and that's fine. The moment you put it that way, business folks get it immediately saying, oh, okay, I see the consequences of my actions. Now, if I want more value, I've got to put more capital at risk. Okay. And it also emphasizes why the CFO was hired in the company. Basically, there's a fantastic idea. That person, the CFO, has to go obtain funding for that fantastic idea. That's the job of the CFO. And the CFO chart basically emphasizes that. And so it should be used in conjunction with the uncertainty value screen. So here we have a CFO chart. And you can see that the oyster, the first project is an oyster, the second one is a pearl, and the third is beta zoom. Beta zoom at the highest market valuation, but you can see that because of the high degree of uncertainty, between low chance of success, it was cut down to size. And that's exactly what we want happening, saying, yeah, great, we don't want to kill the idea, I know it's speculative, but it's not our top priority. There's a lot of uncertainty that needs to be resolved, and we will invest appropriate to a much more modest learning plan. And once we get the evidence, then we can get excited and pump in more money on it. But this is kind of mixing the heart and the head, that yes, we will want to kill these ideas, but we want to manage them in a responsible manner. So let me stop here and get your reflections and questions. Do we ever normalize value for the CFO chart? We always seem to overestimate the value for it. Well, it's interesting. It's a great question, Peter. So there are two constituencies here. One is the development folks, and the other is the market folks. The development folks tend to be very optimistic about their ideas because it's their baby. That's why you generally don't ask them the size of the market and the market valuation questions. But what they are very knowledgeable and very conservative about is committing to deadlines. So you ask them the probability of success questions. And the market folks, you ask those guys the size of the market questions. So basically, you're tapping into people's strengths, and you're talking to them in a language that they actually can understand and can answer in an intelligent manner. And then this process basically brings all of them together, and so you get the overall value, which takes both into account. Kathy says, do we ever have to, well, I'm seeing a bunch of questions. Let's see. We are a small company that is trying to innovate, but where do we get the data needed for all these decisions? Again, a fantastic question, Kathy. One of the biggest misconceptions in organizations is that they need to go get data. And I will argue that we often ignore the data that exists in the internal employees of the company. They know a heck of a lot about development uncertainty. In fact, one of the landmark studies done over 30 years by Eli Lilly is of calibration of what the internal folks said would be the chance of success of their drugs and what actually was successful in the market. And they found a fantastic correlation. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. It's like a straight line. And that basically gave us much needed evidence to say that talking to your internal people involved in development is far more effective than doing a market study about chance of success. Now, you could get help, external help on the market sizing questions, but even here I found that internal folks who are market facing have a much better idea about these things than external agencies that will do a market study for you. So that would be my short answer to that question. I've also found Bob says I found a Monte Carlo app for Excel spreadsheets to visualize value. Well, see, I generally hesitate using Monte Carlo simulations because first, Monte Carlo simulations are hard to set up. Set up in Excel, anything that takes you into Excel, I'm very suspicious of because Excel kills conversations. You have to rely on high priests of Excel, and then it becomes very difficult. You can't immediately pull things up and talk about it. So it's good as far as it goes, but you have to use it very carefully so that it supports the conversation instead of killing it. And then Christy says, how can large companies use this method if other teams competing for development dollars are not? If other teams, well, the interesting thing about Christy is a great question. One of the ways in which people have used these ideas is a team that really gets it makes the case with these methods, and they look so good to the entire company that everybody else realizes they have to raise their own standards. So that's a pretty typical thing we've seen again and again, that people use these ideas and these methods to communicate value to upper management, and then upper management loves it so much because we're not saying you're evil, we're not saying you shouldn't ask, we're saying no, you should ask, and here's how we're going to communicate it to you, and here, you have a right to ask these questions. So that it just makes the whole business process less about lying games. So, people often do these things like they'll pad their budget and then upper management knows it, so they'll slash it anyway. Instead of that, we're telling the whole truth about our uncertainty, and here's what we get. So I have found that projects we've been involved with doing these kinds of things, a very strange dynamic emerges where upper management doesn't ask any further questions. After seeing the full breadth of this, they say, okay, accept. I believe you've done a truthful job. There's no reason for me to undercut you. So that's one. And there are some other questions. What about the last responsible moment? The opportunity generally decreases over time. That's true. So the last responsible moment, this gets to the learning plan, and you would have to, until you hit the market, you can always pull out. So that's very much true. You have to manage that responsibly. Ronald has a question. Where would assessing regulatory factors come into play in coming to market? So regulatory factors typically, I'm going to take a quick guess. Maybe you're in a pharmaceutical industry, and if so, that should be very much a part of your learning plan. You can't finish development unless you have regulatory approval for a drug. So you're not even hitting the market. So maybe one of your phases is FDA approval. So that's how it would come in. Can the value of resolving uncertainty actually help us determine the value of methods to reduce uncertainty? Well, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Can the value of resolving uncertainty actually help us determine the value of methods? Well, actually, no. That's a great question. We can spend a lot of time trying to resolve uncertainty in things that don't really matter. So in the tornado, if we are obsessing about getting our costs down in this range, the tornado basically says, move on. If you've got it in this range, it's fine. It's not going to kill your business. And it gives you a powerful discussion tool that everyone can align with and say, here's why we want to move on. This is important. We don't want to drop the ball on this, but it's not. There are other more important things to focus on. So great questions. Let's see if there are any more. People don't want to invest in in engineering-driven companies, people don't want to invest in market research. I think market research is a very abused term, and what people tend to mean is outsourcing it to a company that will go give you this information. And I will argue that these patterns are taking us towards creating a cross-functional team that collaborates to talk about the market intelligently. So it's not about getting every last bit of data into the system to do this analysis. It's about facilitating a session where within a day's time, we can draw out a learning plan, draw out our basic range of market uncertainty, and then, yes, of course, we'll keep refining it. People can go back to their desk and look for more information. But just doing that ritual in a company, that process, it brings a lot of clarity. It brings a lot of alignment, saying, here's the information that's actually really important. Maybe there is something where we need a market study conducted, and we can identify what those areas would be. So for instance, in our example, in our simulation, Beta Zoom would be a product where a market study might make sense because we understand so little about that market. So that's how I would answer that. Okay, so let me wrap up by making some concluding remarks. So I told you I want to avoid giving you a process. I want to give you the logic, the patterns behind this, and you can make your own process. But I also wanted to give you a little map. So the practices I've really shown you, or the ones I've used in the simulation, they derive from these patterns and these values, and they are what I'm currently calling analytic practices because that's the closest I've come to it. And this is a quick map. So you're talking about identifying proof points, creating a learning plan with those proof points, and then assessing evidence. And that's your development uncertainty. That's what we did in the first simulation. And what this tells you is the work that you need to do to deliver the proof points, which is great. Then you have on the market side the assessable economic factors. Once you know what those are, you can assess extreme credible ranges on all of them, and then identify the most leveraged uncertainties with tools like the tornado. And then what you get is a 10, 50, 90 summary bar, and you also get the ability to watch the downside and swing for the upside. Now, if you just do these two things, right, you already are so far ahead of the curve in managing uncertainty in your projects and the business development aspect of it. But if you go all the way to the end, combining the two with a simple option valuation, you get an incredible amount of value by looking at projects in comparison with each other, picking the great projects and letting go of the good ones. And that in turn, basically informs the work that you need to do on the tornado and on the proof points. That helps you prioritize and complete the cycle, if you will. So we started off with this picture, and I filled in the arrow saying that the analytic practices, they propel us toward the goal post, but they're not the whole story. There's a whole story beyond this on the strategic side that I have not included. Maybe that's the topic of another webinar. But these are the analytic practices, and they actually give us the foundation on which we can collaborate. They basically take us towards a working business model. The learning plans are all about how do you engage customers and collaborate in making an actual plan to do that. And they allow us to respond to change by planning for it, saying, what if the market, sucks? I mean, we find out that we're completely wrong. Well, that basically reduces the valuation, and then you invest according to what you believe. And I'm going to come back to this slide in a moment. I had a question earlier on about strategic fit, and I wanted to address that. So this is my appendix. I didn't know if this would come up, but since it has, dry intellectual logic does not really motivate people to reach excellence. Therefore, in the context of business development, find the values that define the purpose of the organization and align your business opportunities and strategy to deliver on these values. So the consequence of doing that is that people will then rally around whatever you've chosen with the numbers, and they'll be excited to make it happen. And I have a little story. So I have a link here, and you can see it's fleshed it out quite a bit more. In fact, this is the area of my research and PhD. We were in this packaging company, and we found that people were getting stuck with an analytic strategy. And what we did was we asked them the question, what transformation on the world do you want to bring about through your work at this company? And people came up with some amazing values, and one of them was making natural products. We want to use our packaging to allow people to have access to food and water which have very little additives. And we believe this is possible. We want to make it happen. That's really why we exist. And then that became the strategic filter. So now all the innovation screens and the CFO chart, whatever you're looking at, right, we are only going to pursue those business opportunities that fulfill these values, that are actually about giving us the capability to deliver natural packaging. So that's how you would do. So the values are very, very important. They are the heart of the company. And so your head is about picking opportunities where you can sustain yourself and serve the world. And the body is about business development, which is how you're combining both of these, and you're picking those that have the strategic fit with your values, and then doing it in the most responsible manner possible. So that's how it all connects. And I'd like to very much continue the conversation with everyone. So here are some links that you can check out. These are some articles I've written on, including business design and innovation, and more about the tornado diagram. There's even a link to an Excel tornado chart, which is open source. You can try it. There's also a LinkedIn group I've started, which is, we'll send out an invitation for all the attendees of this webinar to join this, to continue fleshing out. I'm sure this is just, by the way, the first word on Agile Business Development, not the last. We have a lot of work to develop this field, but I think the time has come to call this out and really create a community around this. And I'd love to hear from each of you, so if you want to reach out to me, you can write to me. There's my email address there.
Somik, I have a question or two for you.
Okay.
This is a really interesting approach, and people have been, asking questions without any encouragement all along, which is quite wonderful. If you're new in this business, and you say, oh, this is a very interesting looking thread of analysis, how do I actually get started in my organization? What advice do you have for people?
Well, that's a great question, actually. There are, I mean, it really depends. So there is a traditional, you go and seek help with people who, in the Agile world, the way it worked was a lot of people who understood these ideas became passionate about it, and they became coaches. And they would then go and help teams. But then what also happened was a community formed around it, and that community started helping each other. And what they did was, so one idea is this LinkedIn group where you can support each other saying, hey, I tried these in our group and this was the results I had, and maybe we need to modify this some way and take it there. So basically, I think we need a community that documents these patterns. We need a repository of these patterns. We need our conferences to start focusing on capturing this wisdom in a common language. So what we're really trying to bring about is a revolution in language. And once that language becomes accessible, people will find that there are takers, because these ideas, I think one of the things that I saw in the Q&A here is there's little new in the other material. So he says, and that's a point I want to emphasize, David's point, there's little new in this material, because if you're presenting something as a pattern, the requirement is it should not be novel. It should be a solution that many, many people have found to have worked, and that's why the community can start to trust this wisdom. And that's right on, David. So whatever I presented, there's not a shred of material here that's original here. And everything comes from decades of work of lots of amazing people in trying to solve these very thorny organizational problems. So I'm not sure there's a black and white answer there. There are all kinds of, all varying degrees of help. You can get professional help. But I think what we really need is a community coalescing around these ideas and trying to capture the wisdom that exists actually, and sharing it very widely. This is just one attempt in that. I see some other questions down here.
Good.
So our organization likes to make, Scott says, our organization likes to make gut feel decisions on importance of projects and what to resource, how to go about creating interest in taking a more probabilistic approach on probability of technical success and commercial success. Well, Scott, I think you would want to demonstrate to people that there's a ton of research that shows that we make pretty crappy decisions when we go with gut feel alone. Gut is very important. Gut, I would connect to our heart. And so there are a lot of things that just sound right to us. And that is where the emotional energy comes from. But there are many things, we evolutionary, the way we've evolved as a species, somehow uncertainty analysis was not on the priority list. It's just not something we are born to do. We have to learn it in a very difficult manner, just like mathematics. And there's a very nice book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a highly recommended book. It's by Kahneman, a Nobel laureate in economics, who basically showed that the primary assumption of economics is false, that people are rational. And he showed that most of the time we make gut decisions which suck and which give us results that we would prefer not to have. So how do we train ourselves to not do that? So that would be a start. I would ask them to read Danny Kahneman's book, gift it to them, and maybe they'll be more open to having these discussions. I see somebody liking, okay. Let's see. So David says, pity that we left the values part as a brief comment at the end. Well, maybe we should make a whole webinar out of my values work. I'm sorry, I kept it. It's at the end, not because it's unimportant, but because it's so important that I couldn't do justice to it in this talk. Which Francois asks, which steps in the process are usually the ones which are the most difficult to do when you start and you have to watch out for? Well, I think, well, that's a good, I don't know how to answer that. I think it depends on the culture of the organization. Some companies have a lot of strength on the technical side, and they can do the learning plans much easier than the market. They would need to focus on beefing up their market analysis skills. And some companies are much better at understanding the market, very poor at understanding their inherent weaknesses and their development uncertainty. So there they would need some help. So it really depends. I don't think I can answer that in a clear-cut manner. Okay, David wants to hear more about values. We'll have to keep that for another time. So any other questions, George, or are we ready to close?
You answered, I thought, the question about formation of a community very well, and I love that idea in that it will help this practice become better over time and easier for people to use, certainly. But I think I want to explore the question just a little more narrowly, and that is to say, in my company, how do I pick a demonstration project, for instance, to introduce my local community to the techniques?
Thank you, George, for asking that. Actually, that's a very good point. So when you're trying to introduce this into a company, you have to remember, I think, was it Michelangelo who said that when you're trying to usher a new idea, everyone who's threatened by the idea will be your enemy, and those who are not threatened by it won't care very much if it succeeds anyway. So being a change agent is a very tough job. And it's a great idea to pick a pilot project to demonstrate it and create a non-threatening environment where people can see how these ideas work. Now, one cautionary tale on that is it is easy to pick a pilot that nobody really cares about. And if you do that, then the results will not be valued. On the other hand, if you take something that's a really thorny problem and everything that the company has tried has failed, and that's where you try to introduce this and say, hey, look, we've been struggling with this for so long, and by using these approaches, we are able to actually move the ball forward. That's when people will start to notice and say, you know, we need to do more of this. So that would be my advice. Pick a pilot area where you're really, really struggling, and you'll get enough attention if it succeeds, and create a non-threatening space and focus on community formation in the company, saying it's not throwing the ball over. It's about coming together as a team, owning this problem, and these methods are what allow us to collaborate. So you're really creating a forum where you can come and have these high-quality discussions.
Well, thank you, and thank you to all of the audience for your questions. By the way, today's webcast has been recorded, and a link to the archive of this event will be sent by email to everyone registered for today's sold-out webcast.
I really enjoyed the webinar very much, and I was a little hesitant about all the interactive elements, but it seemed to work, so I'm pretty thrilled about that. And yeah, as George said, if there are any last questions, we can take them.
I have to admit, this is, of all the webinars that I've been party to with PDMA, this has been by far the most interactive.
Great. Well, thank you, Somik. This webcast was brought to you by the PDMA with the support of SmartOrg. On behalf of our moderator, George Gibson, and our speaker, and the PDMA, thank you for joining us today.